Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Locke and Key. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I do appreciate that. It definitely seems like based on what we got in this episode, we are definitely going to dive a lot deeper into the Key's origins, plus like the Omega Door a lot more, because we saw its origins in 1775. And, like, they found, like, some soldiers found the door behind a wall. Like, there wasn't even a door yet. So, the door getting built, like, the keys and everything, that came much, much later. But, obviously, we find out throughout the episode that the keys come from these beings from that other world. When they don't find a human host immediately, when they come over, they just turn into metal. And that metal only exists in that world. So, that means, like, every key that they use that exists in this universe, in this world, is one of those demons, but it's like, and I guess like each demon can become a very specific key. So it makes me wonder, if you take the demons out of like Lucas and Eden, could they be turned into keys right now? Like, is there even a means of removing them? But what keys would they create? Because it doesn't seem like there's a special process of like, oh, well, it's like, no, like each one can become its own key, which I guess that in itself showcases that there's no limit to the number. It's like, oh man, there's only 666 keys. Why that number specifically came to my mind is because it's a number I've been rolling around in my head for a story I've wanted to write, where someone has special abilities like magical spells that go up to 666. But I also think of like Devil May Cry 4, where there's the Pandora's box that Dante gets. Spoilers a little bit, like from a game from like 2008, but essentially like he gets a suitcase weapon called Pandora's box, which morphs. You can't do all 666, but so apparently like the weapon holds like 666 different forms. Well, I just threw the number out there. I'm going into an explanation that's completely unnecessary, but there's an infinite amount, like as many as those creatures out there, like those demons or whatever, each one of them can become a key. So it just takes the right process to make that. But going back a little bit, I just think it's fascinating to know, like, right, there was no door there. That means the door came about later because the keys came about later. So it's interesting, like, who became the Omega key for there to be, like, I don't know if a lot of these questions are, like, answered in the comic. I don't know if these are questions that, like, the show's going to answer later on. Once again, this is just me watching the first episode of the season. I'm watching these one at a time. So a lot of these questions I have immediately will probably get answered later, or maybe not. Maybe it's something I'd have to read the comic book series to get a lot of these more in-depth answers. Because speaking of the keys, I remember hearing something from someone back in a little after season 1 came out. I've never read the comic. But I was hearing from someone who had read the comics. I don't know how true this is, but I think they were saying, like, some of the keys in this series are combined keys. As in, like, oh, this key, like, actually doubles up. It's like, in the comics, maybe it's 2 separate keys, but act as one key doing a very specific thing. There's some keys that they made up, which I'm not too surprised. Usually that can happen with adaptations of stuff like that. When there's, like, specific things, when you get to the adaptation, they can shift things up a little bit. But that's what I heard. I don't, like, once again, like, this is just me going by what I heard from someone who I believe had read the comics. But to be fair, this was, like I said, back when season 1 came out, so I could be misremembering. Because I have not read the comics, any of the comics at all, so kind of putting that out there. But obviously we see, like, you know, one of the soldiers gets possessed by one of the demons. He goes on a rampage, starts killing everyone. Granted, he gets shot into the portal, and then there's the main dude who gets struck, which we see his eyes turn black, which I'm like, and he, not only that, he morphs into a monstrous form, and like, we've yet to see that. Granted, I feel like if that had happened to Lucas, would have been a little more like, huh. If that happened to Eden, I feel like there would have been a little more, huh, what's going on there? But for this particular character to look and morph like that, might be like whoever possessed him was top dog demon or something. So there's still some questions that need to be answered on that front. But obviously, the Locke children themselves, obviously, still in Matheson. It's been 3 months since the season 1 finale. And so, obviously, you know, it's just like, all right, cool. Like, they're all using their own keys. Still finding some keys because Bodhi found, like, a Hercules, like, key that gives him superhuman strength. But it's still the thing of, like, right, Nina doesn't remember. Like, she's like, oh, he's like, right, I wish you could remember magic. And she's like, oh, how'd you move the couch? And it's just like, yeah, right, same conversations over and over again. Because we never got the answer from Nina, because, not Nina, Ellie, because she brought up, like, that they were able to keep their memories of magic because they did something. They never went into explaining how they did it, though. Whether it was, like, a key, whether it was like what the process was in the long run. But obviously it's just like them kind of enjoying the keys and like passing. It's like, oh yeah, like, oh, like, you got this key, oh, let me get that key and let me get the head key, because like you have for example, well, I like what they've done too. They've expanded upon, like, you got a general idea about everyone's like head place. It's interesting that we should also know we've yet to actually go inside of Tyler's. We've only seen like the front door. Obviously, we got introduced to Jackie's front door, but then like you take Kenzie's, where we actually go into the inside, but it's, you know, it still has the revolving doors. But is that supposed to be like, right, that as things have changed for her, it's manifested in different places, or is it just like she went to, because like hers is a giant mall, it's topsy turvy, it's like a wonky place, so it could just be like, oh, she just happened to go in one, but she didn't go through the mall anymore. She was like at the water, like at the Swan. She walked across the water and then exited like through the revolving doors. So who knows how it's structurally, like the structure of it, like is it the same, or just maybe because she goes back to that spot so much, that's like the main spot. I know I'm asking too many questions. It's like, is it that big of a deal? No, but it's just like stuff like that, and like my mind like starts racing about, like, oh, I wonder how that works, what that's all about. But obviously there's a whole situation with the splattering, which, speaking of that, Netflix released a trailer, and I saw like the trailer. I was like, because all it said was like the splattering. It didn't say Lock and Key, like at least for the titling. And I'm like, what is this? I was like, oh, this kind of looks like a cheesy movie. It's like, is this a real movie? Is this supposed to be a joke movie? And it comes out and it's like, oh, they're in the theaters. I was like, because I saw on screen, I was like, hey, isn't that Kenzie from Locke and Key? And it's like, oh yeah, like I completely forgot about the splattering. I completely and utterly forgot about that until I was rewatching the season 1. I was like, oh, that's what, okay, so that wasn't just making it out of nowhere. It's like, right, I forgot it being a plot point with the Savinis and everything. So, but yeah, they've continued working on that. Obviously, you have Gabe Lucas still doing his thing with Eden, keeping it low key. And I love that it is an interesting thing that Gabe is playing the role of like, hey, I'm the getting close to Kenzie and stuff like that. But even Eden's kind of like, aren't you playing that role a little too tight? Like, you know, of like playing. And then like at the time, like Gabe, who was looking like Dodge, is like, shut up. Like, I can get rid of you at any point in time. So, because he makes it pretty clear later on, it's like, I'm an Echo, nothing can hurt me, you can actually die. Like, yeah, they're pretty durable, like the demons, sure, but him being an Echo puts him in a whole different lane, as like, I guess if they sustain enough damage, they can die. It's just like, Lucas is in that special case of being an Echo, it just pretty much makes him immortal. Now, special ways around that, we still are unclear. The best special way would have been throwing him through the Omega door, but sadly that ended up being Ellie, but still. We also learned something we never really got into about the identity key, was that the identity key can't make you look like a, because you have, it's like, right, we want other stuff like, what, can I just make myself look like Kenzie? And you have Gabe be like, yeah, go ahead, try it. And Eden did, but it didn't work, because you can't, like, you have to make up a person. That's why it's like, oh, that's why I can look like Dodge. It's like, well then, but you made yourself look like Lucas. No, like, I was already Lucas. This is the body I'm in. So it's just like, oh, you turn into someone else and then you turn yourself into Eden. It's like, no, you were always Eden. So that's what that comes down to. So just an interesting, like, we never really got that clarification last season, because right, it makes sense, like, why Gabe, because like Gabe isn't a real person, Dodge isn't a real person. So obviously the name comes from Lucas, like it was a nickname Ellie gave to Lucas, but still. Problem is, they've also still got the Shadow Crown, because Eden used it later on to kill those guys who came, like, you know, in checking out the cave when they were picking up the metals. So they ended up killing that dude, and, you know, well, Gabe killed him, and then Eden had to bury him. And as I write, they're working on forging new keys. Now, what these keys do, still a process to figure things out, but some interesting developments. Obviously, we have the whole Brian and Duncan situation. They're engaged. They're going to get married. In fact, they want to have the wedding like here at Key House. You know, that's probably, well, because apparently it was Duncan's idea to have it there, even though like there's kind of bad memories associated with, or rather the lack of memories associated with it. But it's because Duncan has spent so much time around them. It started, because we do see like there is kind of a crack to like the magic, because little by little, Nina, the more she's exposed to it, the more she's like remembering, but she does still end up forgetting. So I think Duncan's in that case of like, he has to like get his mind ready for it, because it's like all those memories were taken out and his brain has been missing them for months. I mean, not months, years, decades, in fact. So it's probably a situation of he has to slowly acclimate a little bit more like Nina has, and then maybe his memories can be put back in without there being issue. Like, oh, it gave him like a major migraine headache last time, you know, Kenzie tried to show him his memories. So, but the fact is that he's like, yeah, like it feels like it's coming back the more he's spinning here. So just considering everything that's going on, it's you just get the feeling like shit's probably going to hit the fan with, you know, deciding to have the wedding at Key House. Some other elements. First and foremost, Daniel stops by and he lets Nina know, like, because Ellie's been going for like 3 months, it's in that period where they might have to start shifting her case over to a cold case. Obviously we find out, like, you know, Rufus is doing good in Nebraska with his aunt and uncle, but like no sign for Ellie, and it's like she would be officially declared dead after 5 years. And obviously it bothers Bodhi so much because it's like, right, we don't know, like his buddy's mom is missing, and like, you know, he wants to help out because he was picking up the couch because he was just like frustrated and broke like the door frame of something. And he ends up seeing, like, finding this giant, like, skull. And he says, like, it reminds him of a rat skull, but it's giant. So you're like, what's that about? Which I'm like, I wonder, does it have any is it just, I would assume it would have to have some correlation, maybe to those creatures. But, I mean, it's not, they look like bullets. But maybe it's, like, in their world, maybe they're giant rats. Like, why would, you know, because there's so much. I mean, granted, the door situation was, like, very limited for, like, Rendell and his friends. So it's not like they would have much experience. But well, obviously, we see, like, the long history of the Omega door being here in Matheson. Once again, we know it was behind a wall, but we don't know if it's been there forever. And then did it get sealed up by the wall? Or did it just open when those soldiers found it in 1775? Like, was that the first run-in with that wall, with the Omega door before it became a door? More so portal, like, was it that the first encounter with it, or was there some history even back before then? Once again, questions upon questions just kind of running through my mind. You have the very complicated, like, relationships that are kind of going on. You have Kenzie and Gabe. It's like, because she's worried about Scott, because it turns out Scott quit, like, his job at the ice cream shop because he spent so much time working on his movie, and you could tell Kenzie was kind of bothered by that. Even to the point, because later on she finds out from Scott, like, oh, he's going back to, like, he got accepted into this school type of thing, but he'll be going back to England in a couple weeks, and it bothers Kenzie even to the point she's inside her head, and he starts popping up. She's like, no, I'm not thinking about you. It's like, really? You seem like you're thinking about me a lot. So she had to kind of shake that. It's like, yeah, kind of hard to escape your head when you're literally inside your head. So she had to leave after that, but because she was thinking about it a lot, because despite being with Gabe, it's like she feels like all the stuff that kind of attracted her to it. I mean, to be fair, he's been scheming, plotting, you know, evil schemes and evil plotting. So it's like he hasn't been the most attentive boyfriend. And I guess in some shape or form, like, Kenzie can probably just feel like things are off, and it just, you know, makes her regret, like, oh, like, I should have. I was undecided at the time, so Scott kind of offered, let's be friends, but I wasn't feeling that. He wasn't feeling it, but he thought it was the better option at the time. So there's Abby, who's like helped edit the music and stuff like that for the movie. What's also interesting too is, like, it turns out all the Savinis know about the keys, because it's like, oh, Abby, like, she's been hanging out with the group for a long time, so she should know. I mean, it makes sense because obviously the question is like, oh man, how'd you get some of those effects in the movie? It's like, ha 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 ha. It's like, yeah, because Kenzie's been helping out with the keys and stuff. So that's how they got in a lot of effects. But from what we saw in the movie, I was like, oh, it's a little cheesy and everyone's laughing, but it's like, yeah, it's a low budget movie. Well, as Kenzie says, a zero budget movie. But yeah, it's pretty dope with the help of the keys. They can artificially make, you know, some of those. But that whole scene in the theater, a fraction of that, because it was actually almost like a full-blown trailer was made for the splattering that aired, and then it cuts back into, like, the theater and parts of that scene where Eden goes off and eats the popcorn dude. That was all, like, up to her being like, oh, you want some popcorn? That's where the scene is, in case you're curious. But yeah, like, because it was something, like, they put on YouTube, on the Netflix YouTube channel, like, I want to say, like, it might have been like 2 weeks ago or something like that. Like I said, like it's just called the trailer. It's just called the Splattering. So that's why I was like, there was until you watch it and you go like, oh yeah, and then it tells you like, oh, Lock and Key. This is and dropping on October 22nd. So regardless, some other interesting developments we found out. Well, first and foremost, Nina saw. Didn't quite see it, but Gabe and Eden were disposing of the body of that guy. It's like, right, it's like the movie's about the, because it's like she's so impulsive. And I mean, to be fair, it's like you've been planning this for a long time. So like Lucas is a lot more, the demon inside of him is a lot more meticulous. The one that's like on Eden just kind of goes on the spur of the moment. I'm like, I wonder why is that? Like, is the one inside more of a commanding officer or more planner, whereas the one inside her is just straight up like, oh, I do whatever I want to. And interesting timing and stuff like that. Because of something else I watched recently that had that, like, oh, someone being meticulous versus someone very impulsive, as they would say. So, but Nina saw it, but it's still like, because it dives in. I think specifically because they used the anywhere key, that kind of erases all her memories associated. Because if they hadn't used that key and she just saw she saw it, but once again, it's like she can grasp enough, and it's obviously like the demon inside of Lucas is kind of like, haha, she won't remember, and she doesn't, so that does suck. But obviously, like the moment, like, it's, Jackie starts asking, like, oh, how did they make all those special effects? It's like, oh, they had some key help or whatever. And she's like, I don't get what you're talking about. He's like, the keys. And she's like, oh, yeah, I remember now. And you're like, and that's where it's like, she's starting to forget. Because, like, Tyler, her birthday is like 3 weeks from now. So it's like that 18 years old is the cutoff age. The closer you get to 18. Because 18 in some cases is considered like when you reach adulthood. So a lot of that childlike wonderment, I guess, is kind of supposed to be like why that disappears. So once again, Ellie and them found a way to keep them in, and so that's going to be something they have to do, because Tyler is going to turn 18 in a couple months too. So, and if they don't find a way, he's going to forget about it. Even if he can use them or whatnot, he's going to end up forgetting about it too. So they got to try to find a way around that. But like I brought up earlier, Gabe and Eden did make a new key. So now that they made that new key, we don't know what it does yet, but that's definitely going to be interesting. That was the only piece of metal outside. They would still need to they had to find a way to get to the Omega key so they can open the door. Either, to welcome more of their brethren or sisterin into this world, or even if just to get some of that material of those brethren and sisterin that don't make it into human bodies, using their materials to make new keys if need be. So Gabe is going to have to double down the whole, like, keeping Kenzie close, especially considering her heart's kind of straying a little bit away, just because, right, you're kind of distracted. You're trying to be that, and that will potentially end up being your undoing, I'm sure. It's going to be interesting, too, because the actress who plays Dodge, I don't think we're going to see her a lot this season. Like, that transformation might be one of the few times, because it's like, wow, you can't be out and about as Dodge anymore, because that could cause an issue, because that, it was more so like, oh, I became Dodge because, like, that's just to prove a point. But it's like, yeah, probably not going to turn into Dodge anymore, because, like, Dodge is supposed to be gone. They're certain of it. But that ends up being a thing that Bodhi talks about. It's like, right, we found some keys, but not all of them. There's still some missing. And it's like, because obviously one of the keys they're missing is the changing, the identity key, which obviously they're like, yeah, we don't know what that is. But also it's like, we don't know all that much, because the only people that could give them answers, well, we learned during that dinner that Kenzie is visiting Aaron. So I'm wondering if she's going inside of Aaron's mind a lot. So, or maybe she's just visiting without jumping into her mind. I mean, because the last time Dodge was in there, so maybe, who knows? Like, maybe we'll spend some time there and kind of figure out. But it's like, everyone else that could give them answers about it is dead. Duncan used the keys when he was younger, yeah, but he doesn't have his memories anymore, and once again, Erin's in her state. So we'll have to see what's kind of happening between her and Kenzie, like, as Kenzie's kind of been visiting her in this time frame. But I think it's a little slower start, but I think it's just kind of a necessary, like, all right, let's kind of reintroduce you to everything, kind of catch you up with all that's going on while also kind of moving the main plot along. So I'm really interested to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.